Okay, everybody. Well, good afternoon and welcome into our, I don't know, what is this, our fourth installment of the MAPGA online education series. Happy to have everybody on here. Just a couple of housekeeping things. I can mute everybody's mic from my end, and I'm going to do so if we can make sure they stay muted. I think the big thing we want to get out of today is crowd interaction with one of the best fitters in the business. So just do me a favor. If you have a question for Kirk, please use the chat feature and type in. If you are, in addition, if you are a PJ member in our section, you can put your member number in the chat feature if you want. We're going to get you in there and get the credit for it. If you're outside the section, we're still trying to figure that out. But unfortunately, right now, it looks like you're going to have to submit it to your section individually, but we are happy to verify your attendance if you need the MSRs. Happy to do that. So the big thing again would be today, please use the chat feature, type in your questions. I don't want to be asking all the questions here. I've got some to get us started here, but I want all of you to get what you want out of this. So our guest today is top 100 fitter at Pete's Golf Shop, Kirk Oguri, 2016 Met Section PGA Teacher of the Year. Kirk, what's going on, man? How you been?
Happening. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much. Really excited to share some info that I've learned through the past 20 years. Just a little small, I guess, bio about myself. I've always been a geek when it comes to equipment. It doesn't matter if it was playing instruments or whatever it was, guitar or golf. I was always fascinated with how things work, how things are made, and then do trial and error, trying to build my own stuff. So hopefully there's something that everyone here can take away from today that they didn't know possibly, and maybe I can make some connections with some people that I don't know here.
Awesome, Kirk. So, I mean, we're all sitting in our comfort of our safety zone here. What have you been up to? If you watch your Instagram, I think we know what you've been up to, but what have you been up to keep yourself sane?
Well, I'd actually say that the biggest project that I've had going actually with my wife also is that she's involved in sourcing overseas. So this started about 3 weeks ago, which is, as we all know, with everything going on, I came up with the idea. I'm like, hey, don't you have connections overseas? Can't we do stuff to try to get these supplies? So everything going on with the PPE and everything, we are actually directly contacting with a lot of states around, Canadian government, hospitals directly, and we're working really hard to try to get supplies to all these people that are in need. So that's been really from 8 a.m. until 12 midnight together. It's just getting together with contacts, trying to get these things, because what's happening is China is really monopolizing the whole market. The U.S. government is making it extremely difficult because there's so many scams going on. So Russo, that's been my whole thing, man. So I know with myself, golf has been shut down in New York. As of yesterday, it was deemed to be 100% non-essential. So no staff, no golf course, can't walk out there. So my getaway is music. So that's what I've been doing when I want to take a break and play my guitar.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll make sure here too, before we're done, I mean, if there's any way or contact information you want to give to the group, the captive audience here, to maybe help you all out with your project there to help everybody, that's awesome. We'll be happy to do that. So starting out first, what's in the Ninja's golf bag these days? What are you using and what are you playing right now?
Well, for myself, I am a Cobra Puma brand ambassador. This is my 4th year with them. I'm actually involved with product creation. I sit in with R&D, with Tom, with TO, with a lot of the engineers. So, I'm directly involved with the direction of certain products, designs of things, certain shafts testing that we want to put into their fitting systems. So right now I am still playing majority Cobra. There's always a road club in there that is not Cobra, unfortunately. Usually it has to do with a fairway wood or a wedge or a putter. But I'm loving the products that are coming out. But to be fair, hey, you know what? Most of the manufacturers, most of these companies are coming out with really good products. And it's really about just knowing what kind of equipment is going to do better or fit better for each individual, isn't it? Right. So it's not, hey, this brand is great, they graded everything. Oh, this person, this company stinks everything out. It's not the case. It's some companies are really good at certain things, other companies are really good at others. And it's It's about just making sure that we fit each individual to their needs.
So, Kirk, I know you have a few slides and everything too that we can get into. Just and you bring up just a point about equipment across the board before we get to your slides there. Just your take as somebody who, and I've been to your spot at Pete's, and I mean you've got the real deal there. Just what's your take as a general rule on the whole state of the union when it comes to equipment these days, quality and offerings and everything, good, bad, and different. Just kind of your state of the union, if you will, on that.
Well, let's do this here. So I just want to share just one
Yeah,
slide.
perfect.
Right? Just
And folks, if everybody can make sure their mic is muted. I appreciate it. Hey Kirk, hang on one sec. I'm just gonna do the
sure.
mute. I'm gonna wave my magic wand here and mute everybody, and then I'll unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Kirk. Sorry.
So for those of you that are not on video right here, I just want to explain. So it says, what is club fitting? Club fitting is the science and art of building golf equipment custom fit to an individual for their specific needs. So to me, that's what club fitting is. It is science, but there is still some art to it. You know, you could look at a website and you look at specs and what their recommendations are of how things work, but it's not always the case. We see anomalies out there and we see people respond very differently to what a certain shaft spec says it should do, right? So it's really the trial and error process and using our knowledge as golf instructors and our experience to be able to fit each person to their individual needs.
Gotcha, Kirk. So, Kirk, while we have you sort of talking through that right now, the first question came up, and I think it's perfect starter point from Stephen Herschel, and that's, can you run through your fitting procedure? I've actually been fit by you. I'd love for you to kind of go through your process with everybody. I'm sure everybody would love to hear that.
Sure. It is very similar to golf instruction. So let's say, Mark, when you came in, even though I kind of knew why you were coming in initially, but it's still about the evaluation of getting to know the person, knowing what they're looking for, knowing what their goals are for that day or for the future. And then the next step that I do is I always evaluate each person's equipment. I take a look at their set as a whole. I look at the flow of their set from the driver all the way down to the putter. I look at wear patterns on the golf clubs, on the grips. I look for impact location on the face. And a lot of times that gives a really big picture of the face to path relationship, of angle of attack, what part of the sole that they're interacting with the ground, things like that. And it gives me kind of a blueprint in my head or a picture in my head as to what I think this person is experiencing with their equipment. Then what I'll do is I will go back there and I will measure whatever equipment they currently play with. So we'll get a baseline. If it's a driver, I'm going to take a look at what their, number one, the club head, what their true loft is, what their face angle, swing weight, length, shaft, etc.
So, Kirk, what technology are you currently using from a fitting perspective?
We've used everything from all of our measurement tools that we use, of golf mechanics stuff or Mitchell equipment, auditor equipment. When it comes to launch monitor, we are an indoor facility, so we've been using Foresight for a long time. Really, really pleased with it. You just have to make sure that the markers that you put on the faces really need to be accurate, right? So that's the one thing that sometimes we're a little bit careless maybe, is so that we get the best presentation of the impact location of the face and the numbers. So that's the main tool we use, but we've also used different shaft analyzers out there. We've used some proprietary equipment called a Shaft Max that has been really good. It gives you the shaft deflection in two different axes. Mizuno's Optimizer is really improving. It's been getting a lot better. So that also will give you your X and Y axis as to how the shaft is moving during the golf swing. And of course, gears is very good. Now we don't have gears, but gears is it's pretty good too.
So talking about, and we got a couple other questions we're going to throw in here in one sec, but just sort of working into what you were talking about with shafts, just talk about your preferences. We all have preferences in teaching, Kirk. I mean, I think you probably have preferences to some degree when you're fitting people. Just talk about your preferences for how you like to fit shafts. There's always talk. Some people just want to look at swing speed, which is a very low determinant, I think, in some cases, but I just want everybody to hear your ideas about shafts, and then maybe just what shafts are really performing well out there, what you seem to be fitting into a lot.
Well, when it comes to the shaft, itself depends on who's coming in. There's a really wide range of prices, aren't there, of low quality stuff and high quality stuff. So that's going on to the evaluation process initially. When I'm talking to the person and they're telling me what their desires are and what they're looking for, I'll have an idea which way to go. If they just go, hey man, I just want the best of everything, I know I'm not limited. If someone goes, you know what, I'm looking to spend this much for fitting, then I have a certain way that it can go. And if that's the case, there are certain manufacturers or OEMs out there that do better when it comes to their stock shafts, right? They happen to use better quality stuff. So I may lean towards them more if we're looking to maybe save some cost. But when it comes to the fitting process, I mean, I guess, Mark, you know that I am definitely more instruction than I am fitting. I would say 80% of my sessions are instruction, but every single lesson that I have is a club fit too. I'm always evaluating everybody's golf equipment when they come in. And I think you have to. I mean, you got to do something just like grip size. You're seeing that person that's holding that club, that their fingers will flatten that club, you know what I'm saying? And their trail hand is just not on there really well. As soon as I do something, yeah, it could be, and it could be a game changer for them. So, it's just looking at the grip, looking at the size, watch them move, right? It's the dynamics, it's how they're moving during the golf swing. That gives us a really good picture as to weight or maybe swing rate, right? Or the MOI that's being created in the swing. So if I see some really poor action out there, a lot of times I will experiment with different types of clubs.
Cool. So we got some good ones coming up on here, but I want to kind of keep the questions in that direction first, and then we'll move into a couple others here. But Sean Kenny's on here, and Sean's asking, and you've got pretty much everything, Kirk, at your place. With limited options and fitting cards, what's the best way to get the player in the right tool? I think that's a good question, because not everybody's going to have the options you have at Pete's.
That is true. So the best thing to do is initially take a look at what you have and put them into categories, right? So if you only have maybe 2 manufacturers of drivers, take a look at what they are. So if you're going to have a fitting system, have some variety, right? Don't have 3 super low spinning, low forward CG drivers in your cart, right? Have something that's going to be, maybe it's going to be like a TaylorMade Sim for super low spin. Maybe it's a Titleist TS100 if it's for something with weight way back, and maybe something in the middle. So that way you might not be able to carry 7 OEMs. You might only have 2, but out of the 2, cover the widest spectrum you can so that you can fit the most golfers.
Kirk, Brian Jackson's asking a question. And he's got 2 question marks at the end of this. So I think Brian's being very adamant about this one. What is stiff? And do you see the industry coming to any kind of universal system or standard?
That's stiff.
Okay. Well,
no, that's semi. I know. Well, okay. So we're going to that, the question of, is there standardization in shafts? No, there is not, right? Not even close. So the first thing you're going to do is take a look at the label on the shaft. Well, something could say stiff, something says firm. And then if you measure each of these different shafts, you can categorize them. I mean, it's wise. I remember, I won't name the company, but I remember seeing some shafts out there that said R on it, measured it, somewhere A flex, somewhere X, right? So who knows what in the world you're getting, but that's because of quality control issue. Right. So sometimes they just put a label on it. They don't care what it is and just go.
I got you. Okay. So Harrison's asking, how do you define success in fitting with a high handicapper or, sorry, my question moved, inconsistent ball striker? I think, I certainly see that with our fitter at times, having to deal with people who are delivering the club at massively inconsistent, maybe consistently terribly delivering the club. Maybe that's a better way to put it, and hitting it all over the face, toe down, whatever. How do you deliver a good fitting for somebody like that?
Well, we have to be realistic with that golfer. So as we first watch them swing and evaluate what they're doing with the golf club, I'll have a fair discussion and go, hey, you know what? This is how you're swinging right now. This is the type of equipment that you're probably going to need. But what are your long-term goals? Are you looking to improve? Do you work with an instructor? Or is it someone that I'm going to help during the session to try to get them to strike the golf ball a little bit more reasonably well, right? So maybe what we'll do is we will lead them towards the type of equipment that's going to make them play a little bit better. Or if they're just that recreational golfer 5 times a year, hey man, my boss tells me I got to go play in this Monday outing and playing scramble, I will just get them the easiest stuff to hit, right? It's just because, one, they don't have time. They might have a young family. They just don't have, they're not a member of a private club. So I will do my best to try to put them into the best that they can, the best clubs that they can play with. It's not that high percentage, though. I think the majority, I would almost say fairly, 95% of golfers that I'm with, I am trying to help their golf games. I'm trying to help them. So we might hold off a little bit on the fitting process. We might actually go more into instruction for a little bit and get them so that they can actually have a much more reasonable swing. And then let's fit to that swing.
Gotcha. So another question here for you. After a fitting, what percentage of people are going with your build from scratch versus getting everything built through the OEM?
In our facility, it depends on if it's a wood or an iron. I would say it's probably more 60 to 70% built by the OEMs for us with irons, where 30% are probably full rebuilds that our master builder does. When it comes to the driver, it's probably 50-50. Because in my opinion, a driver's shaft itself probably has a little bit more influence than an iron shaft would when it comes to quality performance. So, our business model at Pete's Golf Shop is not, you have to rebuild everything, even for that 35, 40 handicapper who can't play, right? And you're going to get a $7,000 bill. That's not what we do. And we've been in business for 40 years for a certain reason, because we want to try to provide the best fits for the majority of people. So some people want that rebuilt, we can do it. Other people that are beginners, hey, we're going to give them some reasonable stuff. Then maybe later on, when they become a little bit better golfer and they have a choice as to what they want, hey, you want a little bling in your bag? Hey, we can provide that.
So that brings up a point that I remember from talking to you when I was at your facility. And when you get stuff in a box that you've ordered for a client and it comes in from the manufacturer, are you remeasuring everything in that box before you hand it to them?
Yes, we will do our best to measure as many clubs as we can. So that, that right there, when we are slammed, we might not be able to go through every single spec of every single golf club.
Sure.
But what we'll do is we will make sure certain things, make sure that it's the right dexterity, it's right-handed, right? Instead of left-handed. So things like, you'll be surprised. Sometimes it ain't the right dexterity. We take a look at the length. We'll make sure that the shaft specs are correct. We'll look at swing weight. We'll make sure the grips are right. Things like that. And then when it comes to irons, of course, we're going to check loft and lie of the clubs, because it's just important to check the specs of what you fit for as much as it is to fit people.
That's a great point. Everybody write that one down. David Orr would say, write that down, right? Okay. So Pete is asking, what's up, Pete? What the most economical shaft measurement tool is available out there? Kind of to our question earlier about fitting carts.
Are you talking about measuring shafts themselves or to fit people for shafts?
Pete, you want to unmute and say something?
Hey, Mark, what's happening, man?
Hey, man.
Yeah, kind of to your talk when you want to measure the shafts to make sure the S is the S or the R or the A, and also to what you just said, if you want to start, at your club to measure when things come in from the OEMs, what would be like kind of the beginner's toolbox so that what you're giving your clients are what you fit them for?
I tell you what, the beginner one is go like that, right? I think a lot of us, have enough experience to even just feel just the flex of something, right? I know that if I feel something, I've got a pretty good understanding of the overall flex of something, or even where it's bending, meaning you can, that would be the least cost effective. But other than that, there really aren't a lot of tools out there that you can actually take a built club, put it on, and go ahead and measure that whole thing. The frequency machine is probably the closest, but a frequency, just remember, frequency machine is wherever it's clamped is what you're measuring. So it's the strength of that measured area of where it's clamped is what it's actually cycling there, right? So you're not really getting the entire shaft, but it's better than nothing. I know that Accra and Cool Clubs invented a really great system. It's called the S3 machine. Now that measures the raw shaft itself. and it measures it on 6 different degrees of freedom, and it can get 6 different axes, and it can measure the whole shaft up and down in 2 minutes. So we do have a database. We have access to that, but it's not accessible to everybody. It's an amazing, amazing tool. And so when we fit, we're able to look at the database and compare different shafts so that we know what type of profiles we're fitting people with.
Kirk, just a question here too, just switching, and then I've got a couple that might head back towards irons as well. But Rudy Gonzalez is asking just about fitting wedges. What's your thought there?
Depends if you're indoors or outdoors. When we're indoors, we are limited as to what we can do. So the way that I do it myself is I will take a look at the person. I will take a look actually at their pitching technique. This is where the live board actually is useful, isn't it? Where we can actually see the way that a person is actually delivering the wedge or how their technique is. Are they an open face player? Are they someone with higher hands? Do they keep their hands low? Do they exit kind of low forward? Do they go left? And we can try to match up that pitching club. Usually it's that the highest lofted club to their need. And then with the other ones, we're looking at how they would use it. Do they use it in the bunker? Are they predominantly just using it for distance control? And then we'll try to match that. And then we'll look at the type of bounces and the type of grinds that we think is best. But of course, going outside, being able to actually do a little combine, where when I was at the golf course, I would take out a variety of wedges and would set up 6 different stations of different types of shots with different grains and different conditions. And then we go through the process that way.
So Kirk, who right now, and you can plead the fifth if you want, but who right now makes the best wedges? I mean, I know you were playing 14 for a while. I don't know if you still are, but what's good out there in the wedge department these days?
Well, we have to define what good is, right? We talk about a variety, having different balances and everything. Of course, Voki does a really good job. Even adding that deep grind to like the lower lofts, I think was a great move to do that. Callaway does have a variety of wedges also. When you talk about the quality, right now I'm all into juicy wedges. So just to let you know what juice is, Jucie. Juicy actually means 14 in Japanese. And so the engineer and the designer of 14 wedges defected from 14 Golf, started his own company called X Juicy, which is X14. Extremely high end, 100% milled wedges, $700 wedges, so that ain't for everybody. Ooh. But it's pretty sweet.
Okay. So are you playing juicy wedges currently?
I have one in the bag. I do. I haven't played golf with it yet because I only got it a little bit ago. But I mean, the only reason why we say it's really good is because of the quality control. It's just when you can mill something out, you can make that face perfectly flat. All the grooves are absolutely to spec. The soles are perfect. The hosel right in that pocket there, where if you don't really get that grind right, it can look a little bit different. The toe and the flow and everything else. So that's where, it's not gonna make your ball spin more. It's not gonna help your yips with your wedges, right? It's just a very high quality wedge is all it is.
Okay. And one last wedge question here, and then I want to keep moving into some of these questions, Kirk, because we've got some good ones here, is how often are you fitting a player using their highest lofted wedge? How often are you fitting their highest lofted wedge into a single degree bounce? And I know bounces kind of vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, but I don't find that I'm doing it very often because our conditions here are pretty close to yours up there. I mean, bent grass and can be kind of soft. I just don't see a value in it in our conditions. What do you see in your fitting when you get on the ground?
You're right, Mark. The number on the sole isn't necessarily the effective bounce. So if I do go for a lower number, it's usually for a wider sole. So that if you take a wider sole wedge, which the person might need, especially in the bunker, and they open it up, it's going to be massive bounce, isn't it? So you don't want to go with a wide sole, super high degrees of bounce. So I will probably go with wider with lower bounce, number bounce, or I will go with something that's a little narrower and go with a much higher angle to it. So again, it depends on the person. So to answer your question, it's probably down in the 15% range. Probably the player with better technique that doesn't quite need that security blanket.
Okay. And what about shafts with wedges? That comes up often too. Like, Should we do the same shafts as our rest of our set, softer? What do you think?
The only preference I have is to make sure that it's not lighter.
Hmm.
So I prefer, so let's say for myself, I play 115 gram shaft. I play 133, 134 gram shafts on my wedges. It's just my preference I have. I also don't like a super heavy swing weight. So I'll play a heavier golf club, but I actually keep the swing weight relatively light, like D2, because I like to manipulate the wedge a lot. So I like to kind of do different things to it. But I do want the object to have a little bit more weight to it. Other than that, can you use the same shaft? Yes, you can. Do you have to? No, you don't. Does the shaft really make a difference on spin? No, it does not really.
Okay. Awesome.
Like the
That's
spinner
interesting.
shafts and all that stuff, right? Nah, it doesn't really change the spin.
Gotcha. All right. Andy Heiberger, when working with a player that has zero speed and hits the ball too low, how do you determine when you've maxed out peak height and or landing angle? That's a good one.
It's all based on their swing characters. So what is their angle of attack, right? So you look at that and what is their dynamic loft and impact. So it's always about the angle of attack and dynamic loft. You can't get them to hit up too much on the golf ball because then they can't hit the ball off the ground. So we've got to keep that reasonable. So maybe I'll have the person hit level, maybe down 0.5, maybe even up one, just because maybe they play on perfect fairways and it's okay. You could get a little scoopy on it. But the search for hitting it higher is very difficult. So, for that golfer, I will probably try to find that golf club or club head that's got the most CG further back and low, just so that at the point of contact, that ball is going to try to project a little bit higher off that face. I'm not concerned with spin with that golfer because they're not going to create much spin anyway. So it's just about trying to get launch angle. So it's launch angle, ball speed. Let's get that launch up. Let's get the ball speed up. And hopefully that ball carries a little further.
Would you say too, when you get to somebody like that, set makeup and the longer clubs is really important for them?
Yeah, even for myself, Mark, as much as anybody that I've been experimenting with 7-iron, my longest iron. So my 7-iron, I carry about 164, 165. I could get it up to 171. But I've had 4, 5, 6 hybrid in my bag. I've had 7 and 9 woods in my bag in the past, especially when I play Bethpage Black, being in New York in the Met section. I get out there, man, you can't believe how many head curves I got in my bag. Because it's all about, man, I got to get that thing up in the air and just be able to hold the green. Because I'm probably using that on 7 approach shots out there.
Wow.
So yeah,
Okay.
so to question mark, it's now some people don't hit a hybrid well, right? So then we're limited there. Other people, they just are not efficient to be able to hit the longer shafts in a fairway wood. So this is where we have to test them, right? We trial and error. Let's see what they can handle. If they can handle a fairway wood, I prefer fairway woods over hybrids. If they can hit a hybrid over a long iron, I prefer the hybrid over the long iron. But if they can't hit any of them, hey, just let's get them an iron that's easy to hit.
Gotcha. Okay. So here we go, gang. It's got some good ones in here too. Okay, Kellen's asking, I'm relatively new to fitting and I've been away from it for a few years. What advice would you give me to make my fitting the most productive? And probably, most productive, and any ideas too we can add to Kellen's question about education, Kirk.
Boy, I wish there was a better database or a forum somewhere where we can really get more information out. Maybe that's partly my fault, or maybe it's the people that are out there that are fitting in this world that are not quite sharing the information because they feel like it's like proprietary, like some kind of secret sauce. I think it's something I could do. So to answer your question there, it's just make sure that you're current to what's out there. Have a good understanding of whatever you're fitting with, what they do, how they're designed. Try to put them into categories. So if you have a certain iron, we know what type of golfer it's maybe preferable for, or if you have another type of driver, what kind of golfer that might fit for, or also to try to do a little bit of research on shafts and what's out there in your cart. So that's the start. Just have a better understanding of what you are fitting with. When it comes to the process of fitting, right now, still trust your eyes. Trust what you're seeing with a golfer. If you're an instructor and you're watching them and you're watching them struggle with something, there's a reason for it, right? And sometimes it might be weight, it might be length, it might be something out there. So just be cognizant of that. You know, have some awareness of watching the golfer. That's my best advice at first, because if you don't have a lot of equipment to fit people with, you're really same as teaching, right, Mark? It's about just all the knowledge that you've gained through your experience. Utilize it even in your club fitting.
Oh, that's really good advice, Kirk. I mean, I think does it pass the smell test, right? Like if something just doesn't look right, you know, I mean, it probably isn't. So that's really good. So a question for you too, as we get in, where you were talking earlier about hybrids and long clubs, and I had something written down here, and we've got a couple more questions coming in, but let's talk about lie angles for a second. And just as a general rule, your thought on fitting lie angles, and especially in woods and hybrids. My driver, I'm still using the one where you bored it out and made that sucker look like as flat as a pancake for me.
Like a hockey stick.
Yeah, baby. Gotta love it. So talk to me about, and to the group, about lie angles with woods and your thought on all that.
Well, lie angles are more important as the lofts are higher, right? So if you look at the influence of lie angle to face angle direction or face normal, it's going to have a lot more effect with your wedges and short irons than it will your driver. But it does have enough influence where you can have a golf club that looks square, but meanwhile, if the lie angle is clear, if it's too far up, let's say it's about 10 degrees up with a typical driver, that face angle is really pointing about 3.5 degrees further to the left of target. So that's where the lie angle can influence that. Now, when it comes to irons with lie angles, I don't fit to ball flight. I think that's a really bad way to do it, which is you see a golfer hitting it left and go, oh, flatten that lie angle. Well, that sucker's already 8 degrees toe down, and you're going to flatten it even more. Now, meanwhile, you're going to hit an iron that looks like that, right? To compensate for ball flight. That's not how to do it. It's probably face to path issues or CG of the club. So I'm not going to try to fit to perfectly level, because a lot of times it's very difficult. But just because a person's hitting it left to right, I'm not going this way first. I'm trying to get the club as level to the ground as we can, so that that person can hit off of the most variety of lies that they encounter on the golf course. And then if we want to tweak a little bit of direction, maybe I might go a hair more to the flat side than I will to the upright side, if possible.
Okay, and Paul's got a question here too, to sort of to our discussion here. But from a club design perspective, why do some golfers, and this is a good question to ask you as a very good instructor too, but why do some golfers struggle to hit hybrids? What's your take on that, Kirk?
Well, I'll give you the backstory of how a hybrid was invented. So actually, 14 golf inventors invented a hybrid. This is a long time ago. And it was because the owner could not hit a long iron. So he goes, give me the sucker that goes as high and hooky as possible. And that's the invention of the hybrid, right? So it was just go high and go hook. And then that design didn't really morph too much. When you have a hybrid like that, where the CG is a little bit further back, which creates a little bit more of a draw bias on that face, right? It still creates that more of a gearing effect to go left. The other hybrids usually are not flat enough for most golfers, where if you really measure the lie angle of a hybrid compared to an iron, most manufacturers are still too upright in that case. So that's why we bore out a lot of stuff. That's why we also try to bend things and try to get them so that the club is as level to the surface as possible. And then if that person is still creating too much draw, then we have to measure the CG and projected CG on the face to try to probably put a little bit more weight towards the toe side to try to negate that effect.
And this is sort of to this, what we're talking about too, is Milk had asked, would it be fair to say that lie angle's been ignored by the OEMs in fairways and hybrids to some degree?
No, not necessarily. It's not that they're ignoring it. There are enough people on the opposite side that are very steep and toe down, and they're trying to prevent the masses from actually hitting it too far to the push side. Well, that's where the battle is, right? It's very difficult, especially when you actually sit in the meetings of product creation and you think about how many SKUs are out there and how many club heads you could actually come out with. You just can't come out with 70 different club heads for everybody. They're going to try to come out with a certain variety, but within a reason, so that they don't go bankrupt also. So some companies will have slightly more upright lies. Certain other companies actually do a better job with flatter. So now it's up to us to be able to know which companies are making flatter stuff, which companies are making more upright, so that you can put the right clubs into the people's hands.
Okay, and speaking of their hands, perfect segue there, Kirk. Joanne Eberhard is asking, how do you determine grip size? I was taught to measure at the top of the backswing, making sure fingers aren't pressing into pads or there isn't too much grip showing. Is it still relevant? And do bigger grips mean it's harder to turn the club over, and the opposite for smaller grips? We've all heard some of that stuff. What's your take on grips and grip size?
I would say grip size does not influence closure or staying open. That's not actually how it works. Because if you build, and I know Ping had a study on that, is that they just change your grip size. If you change your grip size, but actually got the swing weight to be the same build, they didn't see any change. It's that when you put a bigger grip, a lot of times it's heavier, it makes the club hit a little. So there are other factors in there that can influence face angle change. So to go with the grip size, and the way I look at it is, I prefer slightly larger than smaller. Again, that's my preference. I look at how the golfer is actually holding it and look at the quality of how they can place it. The first thing I'll see is when you see that person struggling to get their hands on there and they're fidgeting around, you know something's not comfortable. And it's very rare that I'll find that I need to go smaller with the person for trail of hand. You see a lot of that. When I go smaller is when I do experience that person having difficulty in that lead hand, where you can just see when they hold it, there's a large space there, and they just don't, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll tell you to have a little bit of tendon issues running down the outside of the left forearm or right for the left-hander. So then I will look at possibly going a little bit smaller in diameter with the lead hand. But in my experiences, boy, the bigger grips seem to really, really work, especially for the average golfer. They just put their hands on, they're much easier, they're more comfortable. But then we have to be aware of the weight of the grip. Right, so just because you go larger doesn't mean it might help them, because you go with a really heavy grip and now the swing rate really drops. That might actually ruin their swing dynamics too. So it's having to understand which grips are heavier, which ones are lighter, and to know what you can put onto their clubs.
Okay, perfect. So Kirk, let's slide out of the hybrids and fairways and go up into the top of the bag here to the driver, because everybody wants to talk about the big dog and hit it further. Mark Anderson's asking, for a golfer first that has an 80-mile-an-hour swing speed with a driver, what drivers would you recommend for him to try?
It depends. Is he hitting 4 down or 4 up? What are their patterns, right? So we don't want to categorize people into head speed. I believe that the most important thing is how they deliver the club. So what is their angle of attack? What is their dynamic loft? And how are they delivering it? What are their impact locations on the face? Then, based on their speed, they're probably going to have a certain potential as to how far they can hit it. So someone, let's say, who's hitting down a lot at 80 miles per hour, we're not going to try to play the game in the air, are we? We're going to just try to keep that spin down, hit those low bullets down that fairway, because that's the only shot that they can hit. So they're going to have to play the ball on the ground, where someone who's swinging 80 but able to actually hit up on it very effectively, when I say effectively, not adding 17 degrees of loft on it, but effectively up. Well, that golfer, we might be able to put different types of stuff. We might be able to maybe make the driver a little longer. We might be able to go with a little bit lower loft, right? And we might be able to get a little bit more out of it.
Gotcha. So in terms of the just driver market right now, can you give the group just some feedback in terms of, as much testing as you do, what drivers in particular, maybe you don't have to say the bad ones, but maybe what's showing up well to you in testing and fittings with your students right now from a driver perspective that you're seeing in the current market?
Yeah, I could probably share this. It's just, let me see if I can get one. I should be able to do a few of these at a time. Well, it looks like you can't do all at one time, but here's just so far what we've experienced in 2020. These seem to be the 4 drivers that we have seen. I did put Mizuno there only because I really like Chris Foschel. He's a good dude, and he always tells us, "Oh, you got to use that driver." So, but TaylorMade Sim driver. The Sim is the one where we have the movable weight in the front. The Cobra Speed Zone, that's the one with the movable weight. So you've got the front weight and the back weight. And Callaway's Maverick Sub-Zero and the Mizuno ST200G. Those seem to be the drivers where projected CG is very low, a little bit more forward for some, but the CG is low to try to keep that spin as low as you can.
Gotcha. Okay. What about just, and again, Kirk, feel free to share any other stuff you want to share with us on the screen as well. What about just adjustability? I think I asked you this on a text the other day because I had a student ask me that, but And I know it's kind of a general question, but some of the best adjustability that you're seeing out there.
If you've noticed, the trend is actually reducing the adjustability. We have less movable weights on the drivers. If you ask me the question, if you ask me to design the best performing driver possible from scratch, it ain't going to be adjustable. And I don't know if you noticed, and I'll use Callaway as an example. If you've noticed their fairway woods performance from different years, so they had the X-Hot series, missile launchers. Then they went to Epic, kind of spinning, you got the adjustable hosel. Then they went to Rogue, missile launcher. Then they went to Epic Flash. It's pretty good. Now Maverick, missile launcher. So if you notice a trend, the ones that are really performing the best are glued. They're not adjustable. They're saving the weight. They're putting it where they need to, which is trying to put that thing as low as possible and disperse, so if you want to make it forgiving, you could save that weight, put it on the perimeter. If you want to make that spin low, you can take that weight from the hosel and put it way down. So it would be the least amount of piece driver possible and non-adjustable. And I'll get my face angle and all that stuff by actually putting my shaft in at different angles.
Gotcha. So as we talk about the pieces to that missile launcher, we're talking about shafts a lot too. I mean, there's so many out there. I mean, I can't even possibly keep up with it. I'm sure plenty of people have struggled with it. Who's providing the best shaft quality out there? Obviously it's a individualized thing, just like a lesson is, Kirk. But I think the question more across the board is who's providing the best quality shaft options out there in the market right now?
Are you talking about shaft selection by the OEMs or just shaft makers themselves?
Sorry, yeah, shaft makers themselves.
That's a tricky question, isn't it? Because if you look at, so let's take, for example, from Project X Hazards. And if you've noticed, you've seen in the OEMs clubs, you've seen Project X Hazards. Then all of a sudden you used to call it, now they call it small batch. They used to call it, I forgot the name. Anyone remember what they used to call them? They used to have that label on the top. But anyway, it's called small batch now. And the difference is it's either going to be made in the factory themselves, or they're actually, a lot of times they are actually using, they're hand rolling them. So that's what they called initially. What was the name of that? It's driving me crazy.
Handcrafted, somebody typed in?
That's it. So handcrafted, they're actually rolling the fibers or the modulus on top of each other instead of actually just making it by machine. But I mean, what is good quality? Well, usually good quality means that the manufacturers can produce the same shaft as many times as possible. So it's about quality control. So you can get a really great stock shaft, a really inexpensive shaft that might perform great, but you get 100 of them, you're just not sure if you're getting the same exact shaft. That's where when you actually spend a little bit more for a higher quality material and better quality control shafts, you'll be able to get the same shaft more often. That's the best way I can answer it.
Okay. And, in your experience too, just because you've been around this stuff so much and you're involved with Cobra to some degree too, is where are we going to go with drivers? Because, we've got these couple of limitations on drivers in size and flexibility in the face. So it's like, where can we go next? Seems like they always try and come up with something, but nothing seems to make a massive difference, maybe year to year. But where do you see the trend in drivers going?
Well, Mark, you're right, because when you actually sit in these meetings, they are high-fiving over 0.7 miles per hour, right? They're having parties for 1 mile per hour. So, the whole thing of, remember back several years ago, it's about 17 yards and 40 yards and 100 yards. That's just not happening anymore. They're trying to find in the best of their ability and of the materials that are available, right? So that's where, when we talk about materials are probably the area where we might see some different things coming out. Thing is, everything is so expensive right now. I don't think we're going to see too much innovation, especially in these times, because you're just not getting any of the materials. You're not getting them over here. Golf is a non-essential thing right now. So we might not be looking at some crazy stuff coming out just yet.
So in terms of talking about shafts, Andy's asking a question, and we got a couple other uh, grip questions again as well. But how do you determine shaft length? What do you, we'll talk about. Well, I don't know if Andy's asking about everything, but we'll start with driver maybe, because we've seen a trend where for a while there the drivers were getting really long, and then maybe back down a little bit. So what's your take on shaft length?
It has to do also with the weight of the club head that you're using. So, sometimes we're limited as to the length that we can make a driver, because let's say we have a driver out there that's designed to be counterbalanced and the head is very heavy. Well, you can't make it much longer than that, so we have to go a little shorter. Then we might have a golfer that we want to put into a shorter shaft, but then we can't get enough weight on that club because either one, we don't have enough adjustability in the head to put the weights in there. We might have to hot melt them, do things. But in general, I want the golfer to actually use the longest club that they can control. I don't go shorter right off the bat just because they're maybe not hitting it well. I don't immediately go, okay, you're not hitting that 45-inch driver. Let's just go to 43. So I'll keep him at that 45, or that's our standard in our store. So at Pete's Golf Shop, 45 inches is what we consider to be our standard of length, and then we'll work off of that.
Okay. And then just to continue that in, you're fitting somebody for irons. Similar, what are you looking for there with irons?
So here's something about the length of irons. I think people get way, way too caught up in length of irons. So let's say you've got a 7-iron out there. Most 7-iron out there are 37 inches. So you're fitting with 7-irons. So then you're watching them hit. And then let's say you decide to go a half-inch long because that person hits that better. Well, they're going to have a 37.5-inch club in there anyway, or 37-inch. So in my opinion, it does not make much difference at all with the middle clubs. It makes the most difference with the longest and the shortest iron in your bag, if that makes sense, right? Because when we make a set shorter, the shortest club gets short. When we make the clubs longer, the longest club gets long. But a 37-inch club is still 37 inches. A 36.5 is still 36.5. And you're still going to probably have that length club in your bag. It just says 8 or 7. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I look at. So the reason why I don't change a length much is because, again, we're considering the head weight. So we take a 7-iron head, which weighs anywhere from 262 to 270 grams. There is a certain limit as to how long and how short we can make that. So we're always considering the design and the build of that golf club first, and then try to fit that golfer. So if I notice, hey, do I believe that person's wedges are going to be way too short? I will then extend those clubs and work my way all the way up. If I notice that the clubs are just too long and I think they're going to be too long in the low numbers, then I'll make an adjustment and I'll make them shorter, making sure that the short clubs, the wedges, are not too short there.
Okay, gotcha. That's really cool. That's a great way to view it. When you're doing a fitting with someone, we sort of touched on this earlier, and someone had a question on here. I want to see if I can find it for you real quick. I kind of lost it here. There you go. Stephen Herschel asked it earlier, but I think you touched on this a little. But being an instructor and a fitter, are you looking at how the golf club is affecting the player's swing, or what the player's swing is doing to the club?
What's the difference?
Yeah, I'm just reading the question, but I think it's an interesting way to look at it, I guess, in terms of, I think you kind of covered it earlier, like, am I going to fit somebody's lie angle to try and affect the ball flight, or am I going to fix the overlying issue? From my perspective,
it's always to be working together, isn't it? If I look at that golfer and I look at what they're doing and I look at the equipment, I want the equipment to match what they want to do. Now, if it's just purely their swing and the mechanics, then I might leave the equipment alone. But if we notice that the equipment is making it more difficult for that person to move the golf club effectively, then we'll make some alterations to it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so a couple more questions here, Kirk. They're starting to fire off a few more here, so I love it. Joanne asked a little bit more on the grips. We're going back to the grips for a second here, but have you found in your teaching or fitting with people any help with arthritis through using larger grips with any students?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason for that, now, it's not just the size, but it could also be the texture to it. So if you have a grip that actually is a little bit tackier, or you have a grip that's a little larger, so let's go tackier, it's because the person probably does not have to hold it quite as tight. So that the person could probably relax their forearms, relax their wrists and fingers. The other thing is the amount that want to close your fingers or close your hand. So if we reduce that, then it could probably take some tension off of their forearms and again, their wrists and fingers. So yes, in my opinion, it can help.
Okay. And so to another grip question here from a guy you know up in your section, Kevin Sprecher. Don't you find larger grips cause players to hold on tighter? Does it affect grip pressure?
If it's too big, yes, it can. So my rule of thumb is I watch them swing. The other thing about that bigger grip is, are we using the same weight that's larger, or are we putting a heavier grip on there? So that's a variable that we have to be careful with. So when I try to change size, a lot of times I will try to change the size to keep the same weight. So if it's 50 grams, I try to find a 50-gram larger grip. If the person I believe can handle the weight and it's not going to be an issue, then I'll actually put the heavier grip, and then I'll actually get the head weight back up to match the swing weight.
So interesting you bring up the grip weight part, because when I was at your place, you showed me something with Golf Pride tour wraps and the different colors and how they were different weights. Can you just expand upon that a little bit, maybe in terms of this is all about just getting it down to the detail and the quality control?
It's actually, I believe it's because of the dye or something, because that white tour wrap grip weighs 7-8 grams more. And it can make a difference to the golfer, right? So when someone says, oh, I just want the white one, I'm like, no, you're not getting the white one. Like, what are you talking about? Well, you can't get it. We fit you for a 47, 48 gram grip. So if the person wants that, then we have to make a slight little alteration to the head weight. So if they want that, fine, we can put it on.
Yeah, interesting. How do you, or how can you, is the question from Julian Scarborough, how can you alter swing weight? What are some ideas there?
Oh, that's a great question. There are many ways. The first is, of course, length, right? So length has a tremendous influence on what swing weight will do. So for every ½ inch that we lengthen or shorten, we will lose or gain 3 swing weights. Another way we can also do, which is a trend these days, is counterbalancing in shafts. I've seen up to 1.5 to 2 swing weight points being moved by raising the balance point on the shaft, or actually even sometimes lowering it to try to get more swing weight. That's another way. And of course, the other is it's adding and subtracting weight from the club head itself. Now, the tricky part there is that, yes, with drivers, the majority of drivers out there have adjustable weights that you can actually put into the heads themselves. You can make it lighter or heavier. When it comes to irons, the majority of the manufacturers do not have different head weights out there, right? So if you request something and you're requesting a certain weight, you may not get that. So some companies are heavier than others. Other companies like Ping, they start with very light heads, and then they're able to add the weight in different areas. So right now with Ping, what they do is they've got the weight actually way down in the pocket hosel and then on a toe. TaylorMade does a great job also where they have that really deep low pocket hosel. Problem is, you can't get any swing weight requests anymore because of where they're coming from. So you can't get swing weights. No.
Joanne asked a question.
So that's where Mark. So
yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to make sure they added. So
yeah,
if
please.
you are going to get TaylorMade, it makes it even more important to know the length of the club and the shaft and specs, so that you can get that club fit and built so that their swing weight is going to be reasonable, right? Don't just go, I just want an inch and hope it's going to be D1. You ain't getting that. So make sure that that club, you know what the end result is going to be.
Cool. A couple more here before we start to wrap it up here, Kurt. But Joanne asked, the Ping static fitting chart, relevant to start fittings with? Usable? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. You know, when you see somebody coming in there and they got, you know, their belt is up to my chest and they got really short arms, probably, I think that's a sign at first, isn't it? Or someone like me who's got short legs, you know, and I can get my hands out on the ground with a hamstring stretch, no problem, get my elbows down. Yeah, I'm probably not going to use long stuff. So yeah, sure. At first, it's about your body and your dimensions. What is your posture? How do you set up to the golf ball? That's of course the start.
Milk was asking about single length irons. Are they here to stay? And are you were using sort of a mixed version of that before. What do you think? And are you still using those?
Yeah, I started actually when I had my PXG set, which is probably 4 years ago. I made them into single length. It was pretty good because they told you can't take the weights out. I did. And so I moved all those, put different stuff in there, and it worked. Cobra. So I would say the whole set being single length probably is not going to stay, but you may see actually, so this is the whole idea was, you may see your shorter clubs a certain length. You may see the next set of clubs a certain length, and maybe the next one a certain length. So we might actually have these steps in different lengths, if that makes sense.
Okay. So
there is validity to it. There's no doubt.
So I guess my question, Kirk, would be, I mean, where does it end? I mean, it's like we go from single to steps to just the normal set. Like, what's the difference between, what would the difference be really in doing the stepped versus the single length?
Well, I think the whole thing is, if you encounter a student, they ask you, hey, how am I supposed to hit my wedge? How am I supposed to hit my 7 iron? How am I supposed to hit hybrid? Well, are you going to have everything progressive? Or you might go, hey, this is how you hit a wedge, or this is how you hit this length club. This is how you set up to hit this length club, right? So it could simplify things for the golfer. I mean, I'm not saying that's the be all end all, but I've seen the golfers that I actually have transitioned into single leg, nobody has switched out yet.
Cool. Okay. So how do you, Andy's asking, how do you determine the longest iron the player should carry?
Usually to do with, of course, confidence of how you hit it outside. Second, of course, is going to be your peak height and your landing angle. We're trying to get that ball to land as steeply as we can. And if we notice that we're getting that peak height down into like the, 75 feet, 80-foot range, we're seeing that descent angle get closer to that 40-degree angle where it's really dangerous, not going to stop. Yeah, let's try to put something else in your bag so that we can recapture that peak height and descent angle.
Okay. Harrison's asking, what, if any, is your stock response when someone asks, do I need new clubs? They come up and set their bag down in front of you and say, Kirk, I know you're a great fitter. Do I need new clubs? How do you answer that?
Well, I'll take a look at their entire bag. So I'll watch them hit golf balls. I'll evaluate their swing. And then what I'll do is I'll prioritize. I'll look at maybe the one club, or maybe that one club that doesn't fit in that bag, or through the interview process, really is more where it is. I'll ask everybody, hey, what do you like in your bag? What don't you like in your bag? Which ones do you feel confident with? Which ones don't you feel confident? And instead of maybe switching that whole entire bag, we might focus just on that one club or certain clubs that they're not pleased with. And then we'll test that club, baseline it, and then we'll see if we can actually put something else that might perform better for them. It's not always about, hey, they're old, they stink.
Okay. So Alan Smith's asking, what mid-size grip that is on the light side would you recommend? Something on the lighter side.
So if you wanted a similar weight to, let's say, a typical Tour Velvet or New Decade, some people don't like the materials, but Win does a pretty good job of the mid-size and oversized. They are the same weight. They're about 50 to 52 grams at a larger size. If you even wanted to go smaller, Win's got even lighter ones at a larger size. Other companies, actually, Tour Velvet mid-size is pretty good. They are about 52 to 54 grams, I believe. So for a mid-size grip, they are not very heavy. I know lambkins are heavier. They're usually in the 62 to 64 gram range. So that'll have a little bit more effect on the overall build. Okay,
awesome. All right, Kirk. Well, last one here, and then we'll let you go, man. But Matt asked actually a good question here to sort of round us out, and that would be, if you don't mind, can you go over your pricing structure for full bag fitting as well as just irons and wedges? Like, how do you guys price it out at Pete's for you, and how do you do it?
My structure is different than the fitters because I'm technically not a fitter. I'm an instructor. So I just chart. I go by the hour. So depending on the person, so I'm $200 an hour, depending on what you want. And if a person does not purchase, I'm $300 an hour.
Okay, perfect. Well, Kirk, always great to catch up with you, man. I hope everybody on here picked up some great nuggets. It's pretty clear if you get inside of this guy's head, we could be there a while with all his knowledge. Make sure everybody here on here is following him. And as I mentioned earlier, go on YouTube and type in Steel Panther Kirk Oguri and watch him shred it on stage with Steel Panther. It's money. I hope everybody in here enjoyed it. Our next one of these, we've got a full slate next week just for everybody. Monday the 13th with Kevin Tanner, a master professional in our section out of Golf Tech. He's going to talk about current teaching trends. It's going to be really good. Wednesday with John Scott Rattan and Pat Bedingfield, swing analysis. They're going to ask for submissions for swings. And again, you'll want to sign up with those guys individually. Just look at the graphics we've been posting up on our social media. And then the 17th, we have Sean, help me out here. Is that you and Leanne?
No, actually, next Friday is actually me and Ward Jarvis, who is a performance coach out on web.com tour. He's works with a few of the guys, making sure that they play better golf out on tour.
Okay, perfect. So we got that. And then the week after, we've got a couple more as well. Sean and Leanne Albaugh will do junior golf. You don't want to miss that. Deep knowledge there. And then we'll finish up on the 24th with Jason Misch out of Peak Golf Fitness, one of the great minds, top 50 golf trainers in America and K-Vest aficionado. So I hope all of you all will join us. Thank you all again. Kirk, thanks so much, buddy. It was great having you on today.
You got it. Thank you, everybody. Enjoyed it.
See you, everyone.
Thank you.